This is a case of an artist who's accused of AI, and the public is very on the fence about whether AI was used in their process or not. And this is the artist in question. They go by the name Juvie. Don't send them hate. Please, please. Okay. In cases like these, also, oftentimes there is no evident smoking gun. So we don't want to be dogging on people like that. There is a suspicion that Juvie's art has resembled some popular AI models. An example is this piece, looking similar to these types of models, popular AI art styles, if AI could even an art style. Some more examples of their work, including this one that has now been deleted. Again, deleting pieces is always a 50-50 because some people will look at deleted pieces and be like, oh, this is proof that they traced or used AI, whatever. Sometimes artists will delete pieces for different reasons. Maybe they think the work wasn't satisfactory to their standards, so they want to delete it so that they can have artwork that actually represents how they truly feel their skill set is at currently. Sometimes it is to hide stuff. It does go both ways. So there's another deleted post. This is detailing on a moto jacket that is in one of the art pieces, and there are some elements highlighted of it being suspicious. Moto jackets typically will have like a bunch of like vertical, like kind of leather strap detailing going down. And in the vertical detailing, something turns sideways, which moto jackets often don't do. And there are funky kind of detailing in the buttons. This one is very funny because it's like two characters kind of like very intimately leaning into each other, except they're looking in like vastly different directions. One is looking straight out, one is looking down. I also do want to point out that this piece again has multiple eyelids. There are real people with multiple eyelids. Super real. I know people like that. My boyfriend's got uneven eyelids. It happens, right? That's not often a trait artists typically draw on their characters. Doesn't mean it can't happen. It's just not often drawn on characters. Typically, they draw characters with one eyelid. The photo also alleges that these are AI models that look similar to this piece. And more side-by-side of art pieces. So here we have another art piece that was deleted, examples of eyes that are still up, and some AI models that could be referenced. Again, I want to add, this is not a smoking gun, right? It's just something to think about because AI, at the end of the day, is trained off of human artists. Midjourney is trained off of like 16,000 non-consenting artists. So if you're an artist who just happens to have artwork that Midjourney is trained on, your art is going to look like AI because AI was trained off you. If you just happen to have an art style similar to the artists that were trained off that AI was trained on, you're going to unfortunately look like you used AI when you didn't. So it looking similar isn't necessarily a smoking gun. It's just a food for thought, This is the call out that was made about Juvie, posted by an account by the name of UFO San 7 weeks ago. It reads, I want to bring attention to something suspicious going on with Juvie. There's strong evidence that they've been tracing AI-generated art. Their speed paints, especially the Madoka Magica one, looks very unnatural. The process jumps from a rough sketch to extremely clean line art, including shadow lines with no signs of using tools like the lasso or masks. They render in small disconnected sections, and which is unusual. And here is another piece that was highly suspected of being AI that's now been removed. And they indicate there's inconsistencies in the character design. So another thing they point out is the difference in style, how on April 19th, a bunch of art was posted, and some of these have now been deleted. And 3 days later, the art improved drastically. They posted this piece. So this is an example, right? Like 3 days later, they posted pieces that look like this, that has a really heavy level of like posing and stuff like that. And then there's pieces May 11th, May 18th, and the post reads, the difference in style anatomy rendering is so extreme that it doesn't look like the same artist at all. That artists do improve gradually over time, but this massive jump feels suspicious. Now they break down other aspects of the character design. So this is their OC, and the OC has some notable elements, including golden long hair, 2 gray horns coming out of the head, 2 ribbons that come out from behind the gray horns, and this big crown and bell earrings. So they note that in some aspects or some of the artwork, the crown is completely missing. Sometimes the horns are missing. Sometimes the 2 big ribbons are missing. Sometimes all 3 are missing. And 2, in the bell is drawn in a funny way. And we'll kind of look at that. So this is the character design of the OC in question. So again, the OC has 2 long ribbons, the horns, the crown, the bell. This is the one where they're saying the bell looks odd because the cut in the bell, right? There's like obviously a gap in the bell so that when the inside shifts around, it actually rings. The center of the bell is just intersecting it, which is not how bell anatomy works. Now, benefit of doubt potentially could be that they just never looked at a reference photo for a bell, so they just thought that's how it looked like. It could be AI. Now, next is they added a Pokemon piece where the clothing from the character Raihan doesn't match up to the official clothing of the character. This doesn't necessarily mean that AI is used. It is suspicious. The thing about AI is that AI is not good at generating characters with complex outfits. It will tend to fudge it up. This is why when we've covered Genshin Impact fake AI art accounts in the past, they will typically make the Genshin Impact characters wear normal everyday clothing, like button-downs, robes, etc. Because AI can draw or generate a robe, a button-down. AI cannot really generate child's complete outfits because it's too complicated. There's too many moving parts. Typically, though, when an artist is to draw a character, they would look at the reference photo and then draw that. So they would get the character outfit correct. The straps of the clothing, right, are wrong. The hood is supposed to be orange on the inside with teeth. That's not there. The coloring is also off, but that could be an artistic choice to make it blue instead of like a gray black. Just some elements. Also, again, the character is wearing a hoodie with orange cuffs on the sleeve, and it's not really maybe it's this, but this is like super thin. So again, it could just be like a miss from the artist. They completely forgot about it. People say it could also be AI. And then the Madoka Magica piece adds that the sleeve is incorrect because the sleeve here, there's a band. There's an additional band, pink band here that is being highlighted on this piece. And in their old 2018 art, apparently they actually got it correctly by drawing the pink bands where they're supposed to be. That's again one way that AI will tend to mess artwork up by being unable to draw complex pieces correctly. I mean, I think one thing that's interesting, and maybe it's a lore thing I haven't seen Madoka. So is there like a lore reason as to why this part of the skirt is just missing? Like most definitely like could be a lore related thing that I don't know because I didn't see it. And here they have their speed paint. The speed paints are what most people are suspicious of about their artwork because they do a base sketch, which is totally fair. And I guess it looks like it was intentional that like there's this cutout here. Maybe it's like something lore related about the anime. They do a really rough sketch and then they immediately start doing the line art as if they know where everything belongs. And they also immediately start coloring the character in with a heavy amount of environmental lighting when the environment isn't remotely blocked in. What I mean by this is like typically the way, not all artists, right? Every artist draws differently, but most artists, when it comes to drawing, when it comes to coloring their piece anyways, right? They will draw their character. I'm just drawing a person. So stick figure. Okay, and then we're gonna give our stick figure person some eyeballs. They're just bald, sorry. They'll draw somebody like this, okay? And then they would kind of block in the environmental colors. Hypothetically, our person's underwater. Okay, blue water. Hypothetically, we add gradient up to the sky because it's water. We add in a little bit of environmental lighting. Oh yeah, right, like this. And then typically people will go back into the art piece. I say typically, everybody draws differently, and they will paint the environmental lighting onto their character. I don't know, paint something like a little bit of, we'll just blend this straight into the environment, something like this. We make it into a multiply layer, you know, to like blend the character into the water. And then I'm doing this with my mouse, so it looks real bad, but you might want to like give a little bit of a highlight on the head. If you really want to be fun, you could draw like, okay, this looks kind of dumb now. I'm trying to draw the like water ripples, you know what I'm talking about? Okay, doing this with a mouse is like turbo hard also. I hope the sentiment is there. But yeah, like water ripples on the head, whatever. Typically afterwards, or some part of the process, you draw both together. Okay, you draw a little bit of character, draw a little bit of environment, blend it together, da da da. You don't often see artists immediately knowing how to draw or color the character when the environment itself isn't colored in. Not often doesn't mean impossible. Some artists are the absolute GOAT and can do that. So there is a possibility, right? But yeah, but that is one thing they do, is that they immediately render the piece fully as if it was in an environment that isn't drawn yet. And they don't need to tweak the colors anymore after they draw the environment. But yeah, normally if you have a very high understanding of like colors, you still need to tweak it a little bit once you finish the piece. Like once you finish the environment, you gotta add a little bit more. But there's no really like tweaking of the colors here. It's kind of just like adding fine detail. And this is their old Madoka piece. That was one of the aspects that was a bit suspicious to people. And you can kind of see a similar thing with like other speed paints they do. It's not a smoking gun. We didn't see them directly trace over AI, you know, but they upload like a sketch piece, kind of something like this. And then they have a speed paint where they do a sketch and they draw in the eyes. They basically immediately know where everything goes again, right? Like they draw kind of block in the head. They immediately, bam, right here is the eyes. We don't need to move it. We don't need to change it. The eyes are perfect. The mouth is in the perfect spot. The nose is in the perfect spot right out the gate. Then they do the line art and again, color in as if they already know how it blends into the environment. Again, definitely possible that somebody can draw like this. AI tracers also tend to do that. So UFO San, going back to the piece, continues, another red flag is the gap between their final drawings and their actual anatomy skills. For example, in the Madoka piece, the base is drawn at an amateur level with several blatant errors, and the proportions are off and certain body parts are positioned that doesn't make anatomical sense, which makes it hard to believe the polished line art and rendering are due to a consistent, skilled hand. The final piece looks far more refined than what their anatomy would realistically allow. And then again about the sketching phase, they added there's a notable lack in tweaking in their sketching phase, and they highlighted the sketching phase of an artist by the name of Yonayama Mai, where rough sketches typically get adjusted by resizing, moving, changing a little bit till you get it perfect, and then you can fix it. Their sketch tends to be basically perfect out the gate. And they add that there's rough sketch matches the final line art really closely, and there's almost no visible construction, correction, or reworking, which feels unnatural. It's not impossible. Really good artists can do it. It's just you rarely see people work like that. There has to be some level of tweaking and adjustment that happens. So UFO stands for the Madoka piece. They notably leave the background color last. Normally, artists add color to the background first to help with understanding the levels, brightness, darkness, warmth, and coolness. But it's odd how they manage to render everything in a way that the lighting and ambience remains consistent, even when rendering in really small parts. And there's no correction in colors of the proportions or the shading, as if the drawing is magically complete in one shot, even after hours of rendering. How do they trace? UFO San speculates that part of the actual process could be invisible to the speed paint due to the fact that they draw in Clip Studio paints. From my knowledge, Clip Studio paint cannot hide layers. And UFO San adds that the biggest red flags is the fact they censor the words trace and AI in their comment section, and that UFO San reached out to them directly and they ended up getting blocked. You know that piece that was deleted? The piece that was the two people kind of intimately with their heads against each other? It's just suspect because we have a sketch. It is a boxy sketch, to be fair, right? It's a bit of a rough sketch. And then they immediately go in with the most perfect line art ever out the gate. And then they start coloring. It's suspicious. Again, I'm trying to play devil's advocate here. They do the paint by numbers type of coloring that some artists do paint like this, you know, oil painters do paint like this. People who have a background in doing traditional art do paint like this. But they're kind of doing like a paint by numbers where they're like painting in different values, different levels, and then continuing on. Just a bit odd. You don't often see people paint like this. Not impossible. But again, I want you to notice, they don't need to correct the colors at all though. They immediately have all the environmental lighting perfect. They have all the really sharp highlight on the back of the head perfectly, right? They're painting on a white canvas and they start with a really dark color for the face, which works out in the end because it blends in really well with the rest of the gray tones they're using for the character, because the character is pretty pale in the final piece, right? Again, they're just painting with a very high level of knowledge of environmental lighting when the environmental lighting isn't there. I keep saying it, and you guys are probably tired of me saying it, but people do paint like this. People who trace AI and pass it off as their own art also do this. So this is the grade scale of their work, but this is pretty damning. This is the final piece of the speed paint, right? And an artist sent this to me. When you overlay it with the actual work they've posted, it's a bit suspicious. This is the speed paint. This is the actual work. And here you can see Juvi's logo on the corner. It's not the same piece. You can see there's like tiny cuts. It's like part of the head was like cut and like reshaped a little bit here. It's not the same piece. Really odd. Because why would that happen? Why would the speed paint and your final piece not be the same? Maybe they rendered it more not recorded, but that would be odd because Clip Studio Paint, the way it records is it records in your art file itself. So if you did that, that means you have to get the file, download it, then reopen your file as a new file in Clip Studio Paint. So you get a second recording and then draw it there and then just never post the second recording. It's a bit odd. So a fair amount of artists gather as much information as possible to the suspicions of the piece. There's definitely a possibility that they just rendered it more later. I'm just confused about the part of why it's not in the recording. Maybe they downloaded the recording before they finished it and then rendered it more later, because I work in Clip Studio Paint. It like records on the file itself. So part of me is just kind of like, if you did draw your piece, you finished it 75%, save the recording. The way they do it is they post the piece and then they, on the like the next slide, they'll post the speed paint, right? So then they later finished the piece, posted the piece, then didn't post the full recording, but posted the one where they did 75% of the rendering. That's definitely possible. We're just looking at everything in the full picture as well. Because I'm trying to play devil's advocate, right? Because like, hopefully it's not AI trace. Hopefully it's just somebody being falsely accused that we could like clear their name. That would be the best case scenario. The other one, people were suspicious because there's this piece and this is their original character. So Aethra, you know, the Aethra again has the long blonde hair. And typically with characters, you know, when you make a design, there's core elements that are part of your design that you keep in your character. You know, the horns, the 2 long hanging ribbon straps, the crown, and I would say the 4 dots on her face and the bell earrings. These are all very notable in her character design. It's a very pretty character design. Then Juvie goes to post this piece, which is missing a lot of the core elements. The horns, the ribbon straps, and the crown are all gone. And Juvie said, I forgot the horns, so I gave myself a headache in the caption. So yeah, it definitely is possible that in drawing the character, Juvie completely forgot the horns and the crown and the ribbons, or artistically chose to not include the crown and the ribbons and then just forgot the horns. Definitely possible. It was just one of the things that people were just more suspicious about. Like maybe some elements are removable. Maybe the straps are part of the crown and Juvie chose, okay, I'm not going to add the crown. I'm not going to add the ribbons. Another thing that was pointed out as odd in this piece specifically, this one has been deleted by Juvie, is the fact that this character, right? The ears are drawn differently for both characters and they both have elf ears. So again, maybe the artist was bored, right? Juvie was bored and was like, okay, I want to draw the ear this way for this character and I'll draw it this way for this other character. AI also tends to not keep things the same. So if AI makes an ear for one character, AI also will tend to mess it up on the same character. So if you can see both ears on a character, AI tends to make one ear look one way and one look the other way. Like in terms of the cartilage. Artists have free will. They can choose to make ears look different if they choose to do so. That is also something that AI does not get consistent throughout. So then we have this post made by a YouTube channel by the name of Umi. This is the same account that did the call out. This is just a YouTube video of it. This YouTube video is really, really insightful. They provide a lot of information, so I recommend checking them out as well. If you're watching on YouTube, it will be linked down below. And in here, basically, Umi covers basically the exact same points. We can summarize a little bit for what the video will cover. Again, I do recommend you check their video out yourself to kind of see their points. The first point that's mentioned is the big jump in quality from April, like, what, I think it was like 19th to April like 21st. So in Juvie's defense, Juvie argued that they were in school when they did a lot of the drawings and they weren't able to post because they're in school. So now that they're off, they're posting in bulk, which is why it looks like they progressed really quickly. It was because the art was done over the period of a couple months and then posted all in batch at once. The second point, again, their OC character having very core elements like the horns, the ribbons, whatever, just being different from piece to piece to piece, which most of the time, if you draw your OC, you keep those elements the same. Sometimes the ribbons will be missing. Sometimes the crown will be missing. Sometimes the horns will be missing. The Pokemon art was mentioned again. And point 4 was that the anatomy was different in the sketches versus final pieces. There's this element here where they said that this video highlights that it looks like the piece has 5 fingers because the way the hand is pointing like this, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fingers. Either the thumb is hidden and there's 5 fingers, or it's like a really long thumb, maybe. Benefit of doubt, it could be this character's left hand. In this case, then this is the thumb that we're seeing, and it just looks like it's a finger, right? And then we have 4 regular fingers. So there is a thought there. Again, the main point of contention is the fact that the way the sketching happens, there's not very much, if any, alterations with the sketches itself. It's just out the gate perfect. There are artists who can draw like this. People who trace AI art also will draw like this because they're tracing, but there are genuine artists who can draw like this. The next point that was made was the fact that the background isn't colored in before the environmental lighting is added, which is what we're talking about with the Madoka Magica piece. Things get interesting because they did a live call. So here is the speed paint of the live call that's happening with a bunch of artists in this live call. And again, Jofa is Juvie on Discord. The couple points of the live call, they were texting back and forth, right? And to give Juvie credit, right? When you're doing a live drawing, being grilled by a bunch of people in Discord, I'm sure it's going to stress you out. And, you know, you might not draw perfectly or things are going to be a little off, whatever, because it's a stressful environment. And I do really want to acknowledge that. So Juvie stated that she drew from her mind with no references when being asked if there were references. And then an artist asked why all of a sudden Juvie is suddenly using the eraser and the lasso tool and stuff when in her speed paints, she doesn't use the lasso tool or erasers. And then in Clip Studio Paint, if you undo, it's not recorded. So Juvie states that they normally sketch in sketchbooks before drawing things digitally. Then people ask to see the Madoka sketches or sketches of any of the finished pieces that she tends to post on social media. And then here you can see the sketches are sent. So the Madoka sketch was up here, and then we have some more sketches. The Madoka piece is a little bit cropped off, but yeah. The artists in the call were like, wait, your sketches look really messy, which sketches do, but the ones you upload onto social media look very clean and not messy like these sketches look like. Also, take note of this, by the way. They were asking for like Juvie's Pinterest board. Take a note of the Pinterest board. So we have dynamic poses, potential background faces, and some furry art, other artwork down here, and references. This will be a point of contention down the line. So in this call as well, an artist offered to pay for a commission and have that commission drawn live, drawn in a style similar to this, which is something Juvie advertises as a commission they sell, so that Juvie could be compensated fairly for their time. So Juvie says it could be possible, but that it would take multiple sessions. Artists chimed in agreeing that, it's totally chill, down for this, as long as you don't draw it when you're not live streaming, so we can see the entire process from start to finish, and without a pre-made color palette. I'm guessing it's because they want to see how Juvie's thought process is when it comes to selecting colors, right? Because Juvie does work on an existing color palette. Again, nothing wrong with the existing color palettes. That's not the point of contention here. People are basically just trying to prove a negative, which is like trying to see whether AI was used in the process or not. So if you watch somebody select the colors themselves, then you can kind of better ascertain their level of color theory. You could make the argument that if somebody could render like this, a piece this heavily detailed, straight off the rip, with all of the colors painted in, with no environmental lighting drawn in, that they must have a really high level of understanding of color and thus would be able to pull a color palette by themselves, potentially. This is where the piece was at as of May 29th, 2025 in the live call. So as you can see, this is kind of where they ended up. So basically in the video, they basically were stating that this is the sketch that they saw in the live call that was offered, but the sketches don't match up with the level of sketches they're showcasing on their social media, because it goes from this to immediately beautiful line art, right? Whereas their sketches are really sketchy, which is how many artists, their sketches end up looking pretty messy. Again, some artists can draw off the rip, right? And this is the speed paint you can see for a piece like this, where again, they do a really rough sketch, immediately go into beautiful line art, and then immediately start coloring in with perfect environmental lighting. Pip seems like they're a substantially good artist, but they use AI as a supplement to take it to the next level, and they're afraid to admit that. That's my theory. That's my theory too, Pip. I really want to believe that it's genuine. I just need to see more. Right? I can't really fully make like a full conclusion on anything until we see more information. There's just not enough to go off of. Here is basically pointing out some anatomical errors in the piece that was done on live, with some arm lengths not really matching up, etc. Could be fair. To give Juvie credit, Juvie is drawing on a 40-minute live call with a bunch of people scrutinizing every brushstroke she makes. So, of course, there's probably going to be some errors, etc. And we should give some grace for that. But here, again, they're using the lasso tool, which they don't do in any of their other stuff. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because in Umi's video, they're basically citing that Juvie allegedly used to have an alternate alias by the name of Dracui. Umi was told this by old fans of Dracui. So the Instagram account was deleted or deactivated, and there are a couple of evidences that Umi states to kind of like indicate this. So one is if we back this up, is the sketching style being similar. And again, similar sketching style isn't a smoking gun, right? People sketch in different ways. Many people sketch similarly. This is the old Dracui page. It could be human error, but the thumb is on the wrong side of the hand. Happens to the best of us. Sometimes we mess the thumb positioning up. I just thought it was funny. They have a sketching style like this, which they allege is similar to the current Juvie account. I do think one thing to note about the sketching style that does make it look more similar is that they tend to draw in the shadows in an interesting way. If you see kind of here, right? Like here, there's like highlights and shadows on the hair, and they kind of carve it all out, which some people do in the sketching style. There's the sketching process, and that is something that Juvie does as well. Again, multiple artists draw like this. The shadows, the highlights are drawn in on the sketching layer already. Shows they must have a really high level of environmental lighting knowledge and lighting knowledge in general, because they know exactly where the shading, the highlights, whatever are. Some more examples of Juvie sketching, and these pieces are a little bit hard to see because they're like more zoomed out, but Juvie will also do that too. I think the Madoka piece is the one where you can kind of see it. Yeah, do you see that? Artists do draw like that, but like, right here, you can see there's like, this isn't a crease or anything. It's kind of just like a shadow that falls on the shirt that gets blocked in the sketching layer as well. Some people just draw like that, right? The Juvie accounts, the Dracui account both draw like that. So this is the biggest smoking gun that Umi states, where the Dracui account has a Pinterest board link. The Pinterest account is a bit suspicious, because if you scroll all the way down, there are references to this piece that was then archived. And again, that's related to this piece here, where again, it's Juvie's piece.
Ever seen that piece before? Judy posted it around April 19th, 2025. Somebody who had called out Juvie before they became popular reached out to me, showing me everything they had posted on their highlights.
Yeah, so this one is a bit interesting. Maybe it's an artistic choice to draw it this way, but the hilt of the sword is not even. The left side and the right side don't match up at all. So that was one of the ones where people were like, this is looking very suspicious. Could be artistic choice. AI would also do that. They're also adding that the way the sword is drawn doesn't match up with the way the hand is holding it. Could be genuine artist error, possibly. And then that Juvie account deleted it. And this was when Juvie had under 400 followers. So then they go back to the Pinterest board, and this one is more damning. So they highlight the furry art here. Take a look at these three. This piece, and where did the last one go? This one, these three, this one, this one, this one. Those on Juvie's post about the furry are the same three photos that are used as the reference by Juvie. Playing devil's advocate. Pinterest is a public platform. Some pins are just really popular. So perhaps Juvie has a Pinterest board where they have all of these art pieces and they just happen to have the same three popular ones. They're again highlighting the same three characters that I featured at this piece. There's a whole board dedicated to this Pokemon trainer, which they did make a piece here. This one is the most damning one, because remember I said keep in mind Juvie's Pinterest board. This Pinterest board, right, where you have dynamic poses, potential background, and faces, these boards are the exact same on the Dracui account. That one's a bit damning. I'm out here trying to play Olympic gymnastics to come up with benefit of doubt, like alternate explanations. I can't think of an alternate explanation for this one. Maybe they're best friends and Dracui happened to add Jofa into 3 of their Pinterest boards as a contributor.
Holly moved to her current account after being outed because her Dracui account was not beating the
This is really damning, the Dracui account. Yep, we got here 4 fingers. We've got a sword with 2 swords, the sword into a sword. You could argue maybe it's artistic choice, potentially. Also, not to mention the fact that these fingers are massively longer than these fingers, which I think is pretty funny. Also, one thing that AI does is AI is not good at putting fingernails on people. It will put fingernails on some fingers, but not other fingers, right? He's got fingernails on 2 fingers and not the third. AI tends to do that. And then the ribs, I don't know what's happening with the ribs over here, right? Like, not ribs, right? These are like, if you're really jacked, you have like the muscle definition. It kind of looks like gills on the side of your body. It doesn't look like random creases zigzagging across your side. If you're capable of drawing pieces at such a high level, you can render this well. You can draw 5 fingers and get the muscling on the side of the body correct. This one's even more damning. Over here, we have a piece where we have a character with 2 left hands holding 2 different teacups and a tray. So there's like another hand involved in this because we see an arm here. And then we have the AI hair looping into other hair, bleeding into other hair, besides the wonky architecture in the back. Can you actually draw 2 left hands? Yeah. But like now we have a case of an artist with a really high skill level, capable of drawing and rendering pieces to this degree, making massive amounts of mistakes in their pieces. This piece has 4 fingers, wrong rib cage, 2 swords. This piece, architecture is uneven. We've got 2 left hands. The hair bleeds into the other. Like, it's getting suspicious. This one's getting mad suspicious. I feel like you can't really argue against at least these points.
Well, if all of this wasn't enough for you, well, a Juvie Trace live on Instagram, if you didn't see the first seconds of this video. Basically, on the Instagram live,
the video concludes by speculating that Juvie traced live on Instagram. So going back to the beginning of the video, what do they mean by this? There is something you can do where when you're recording, you greatly increase the exposure of the video. So if you have like really hard to see sketches that I take Photoshop, I draw a sketch, okay? Like hypothetically. We got a bunny sketch. Theoretically, if you lower the opacity a lot, so you see it, you can barely see it. You make a new layer, and then when you record with your phone, you just up the opacity on your phone so the lines don't show. And then I could draw over this and essentially trace it without you really knowing because I've upped the opacity so much. That is what the video alleges Juvie did in the Instagram live stream.
Without guidelines or anything like that.
So somebody took the piece and the live stream and then upped the sharpness and contrast. And there's weird sketchiness happening in the background.
I don't know.
Like if you see here, like heavily upped, there's a lot of lines and like basically like what looks like dirt on the canvas. This one is really interesting. So if we go here, this is like hard to see, right? This is the live stream sketch in question, where this is again where they really up the sharpness and stuff like that. There's again, you can see like faint gray lines going across the piece. This one is really interesting because there's the faint shadow of an eye patch here. The mouth you can really see. You can see the curve of where the smile line of the mouth should be, but that wasn't part of their sketch. This is like a gray line. And there's like another gray line by the ear. Maybe that's part of a sketch. I don't know, right? And in the final piece, there's a curve for the mouth and there's an eye patch. And people suspect that they were live tracing on Instagram. Again, I think the true final thing that would exonerate or like clear their name, because people to this day are still kind of like, is it AI? Is it not AI? Da 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 da. I think the true thing that would clear it up, honestly, is if they did a live stream fully completing a piece, because they did 2 streams, right? One, that private Discord stream. Then they did another stream, that public Instagram one. This is the video. The Instagram one is still up on their page. In both pieces, they drew a sketch and they didn't draw the finished piece. I feel like everybody's in agreement that Juvie knows how to draw. They have hands and they can draw. The dispute is not can Juvie draw. The dispute is just, are some of these specific pieces, like the Madoka one, using AI in some way in the process? At the end of the day, unless they post a full live stream showing their rendering process from beginning to end, which was probably going to be hard to find given the fact that, you know, pieces like this probably take a really long time to do. So it's not going to be possible really to do it in one sitting. There's always going to be that air of a what if, especially the Dryakua accounts and the very likely link between the 2 accounts from the Pinterest board. It's a bit suspicious. Hopefully they didn't trace AI. Hopefully it's genuinely drawn and not a faked process in any way. It's kind of like a limbo. I feel like as of this point, and I'm curious about your thoughts, I feel like there's still an air of a possibility that AI could have been used in the process just due to the lack of evidence substantiating otherwise. You know, we can always also err on the side of innocent until proven guilty, so we don't have a smoking gun necessarily. Just a lot of conjecture that kind of is like a little, a little side eye. On a complete other note, I was just going through Juvie's account again. What gun is this? This is somebody who's supposed to be holding a Glock, isn't it? Why are there 2 handles in different directions nonetheless? It's not even like an AK where you kind of like have the mag and then you have the handle, and I guess you hold both. This just makes no sense. Oh, by the way, there's no trigger in the gun. They have a finger where the trigger should be and there's just no trigger. No, the Glock proportion is super off, by the way. It looks like it should be a revolver with the chamber here, but it's not. And okay, this is the thing when it could be like, we can give benefit of doubt, but at a certain point, there's too many benefits of doubts, you know, where it gets suspicious, right? Because again, you're telling me that in this piece, you forgot the trigger and you drew a gun with 2 handles or like a handle and a clip on a gun that doesn't have a clip. And you drew your OC and you just happened to forget a lot of key components on the OC's design. And you forgot that the cutout part of the bell does not intersect the middle part of the bell because you didn't look at a bell reference for drawing, even though you did it correct here. You just maybe forgot here. And you can paint with really good environmental lighting. And your line art looks perfect out the gate, no fixes, nothing. And you have a piece that you uploaded where the speed paint and the final piece do not look the same. Maybe you uploaded the speed paint earlier and then the final piece you uploaded later, but they're very different in like complete anatomy as well. Maybe it was uploaded earlier, like a 75% complete version. And maybe the Dryakua account has nothing to do with you, but you guys both like the same 3 furry art pieces that you guys pinned and then you reference in your art piece. And maybe the Dryakua person is also your friend that added you to those same 3 Pinterest boards as a contributor, which is why it shows up on your Pinterest account. Or maybe something is not quite adding up at this point. Okay, yeah, sorry. I'm going to another piece with a gun. We also have this piece where there's a gun, right? She's holding a revolver. Her finger's on the trigger, but the finger on the trigger is astronomically smaller than the other fingers holding the handle of the gun. I don't know how this happens. Maybe it was an accident and they forgot. Don't know. Did they trace AI for the piece? I don't know. I think they can draw. I do think AI was used at some point in the process. There's something else going on basically because there's too much that's off. The thing is, even in the sketch, the finger size is wrong. They just drew it wrong and they just ran with it. And the thumb looks kind of funky because if you grab the barrel of a gun or like the barrel of anything for that matter, like if you're referencing something, your thumb doesn't really look like that. But that's like neither here nor there at this point. Like at some point, it's a little too suspicious. And again, the final point that I'm making is that this isn't to say that artists aren't allowed to make mistakes, right? These are all things that could be genuine errors. It's just when they are able to render allegedly at such a high skill level, but almost every other piece has like a massive anatomical or something else error in it that is a bit suspicious, or the skill level they seem or should be able to draw at. I always think the weaponry when it comes to guns is always interesting because AI is so bad at drawing guns. Like it's so bad when it generates weapons. Like the guns, swords, whatever. It just comes out looking mad wonky. And I'm not necessarily saying Juvie had traced AI, but when people who trace AI use weapons in the piece itself, it comes out looking super jacked. So what are your thoughts about the Juvie situation? Do you think there was tracing of AI generated images, or do you think the images and the designs were completely original? I would love to hear your thoughts. And again, please don't send hate to them because at the end of the day, we don't have a smoking gun. We just have many a benefit of doubts and a lot of suspicion. So if you like the video, I appreciate it if you like and subscribe. Don't forget to check me out on VGen and Etsy. I sell digital art for streamers and creators over there. I also have a coffee with free resources for streamers, and I also stream on Twitch 3 days a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, Saturdays at 6 p.m. PST. So hope to catch you guys there or in another video.